here's my question. Have we actually forgotten what freedom looks like? I was thinking about this because we had Charlotte Pence on a while back, and Charlotte Pence, obviously the daughter of Mike Pence, our vice president, and Mike Pence to me is one of the most abused politicians out there. Just yesterday, I think it was some celebrity tweeted, "This is the most dangerous politician in America," and I thought, because why? Because you disagree with some of his opinions. He just gets attacked and attacked. He's just a punching bag. He's one of these typical Republicans that they attack and attack and attack. And then after he's, out of office, they say, he was great. He's not like the Republicans they have today. It's just like they're talking about George Bush now. They're saying, oh, they were great, not like Trump. Well, soon it'll be, well, Pence was great, not like whoever the next Republican is. So I asked Charlotte, what's it like having your dad just attacked all the time for nothing, for just being a decent, ordinary guy, a straight up guy? And she said that when she went to events with Mike Pence, it would upset her to see people protesting or shouting things at him. But he would say to her, that's what freedom looks like, right? That is a very, very mature response. This is why I call Mike Pence Mensch. I just crush his name together because he is a mensch. He understands that freedom doesn't look like what you like. It doesn't look like everything happening the way you want it to. It looks sometimes like absolute chaos. Now, the thing is, we already know that a lot of people on the left have abandoned the idea of freedom. And we talk about it every day, right? The people on campus who shout down speakers, the people who want to ban certain kinds of speech, Hillary Clinton, who doesn't like the fact that corporations can make documentaries that attack her, all those people who are who don't seem to feel that an election should be able to overturn their plans. They feel elections are great until suddenly their elite ideas of how the global world should unfold get wrong-footed. Then suddenly elections are not so good. There must have been a Russian plot or something like this. We know the left does this all the time, but recently I have started to hear this stuff from the right. And, the right, of course, covers a wide range. I'm on the right. But, I've started to hear from certain people on the right that basically freedom has to end because we're no longer moral. So Pat Buchanan, who has toyed with fascism for a long, long time. He's been in several administrations, several Republican administrations, but there's been hints of anti-Semitism and hints of kind of fascistic leans. He wrote a column over the weekend that was just talking about the rise of the right in Hungary. Now, I'm not going to comment on Hungarian politics because they've got all this pressure to take in immigrants that they don't want, to take in refugees that they don't want. And I understand that. Some of the attacks on the guy there, what's his name, Orbans or something like that, they say, he's anti-Semitic because he attacked George Soros. George Soros is one of Israel's greatest enemies, so I don't see how it's anti-Semitic to attack him. So forget about that. But he starts to say, Pat Buchanan starts to write, that democracy is not basically serving the people anymore. And he starts to talk about America. And here's what he says. Our democracy boasts of a First Amendment, freedom of speech and press that protects blasphemy, pornography, filthy language, and the burning of the American flag. We stand for a guaranteed right of women to abort their children and of homosexuals to marry. We offer the world a freedom of religion that prohibits the teaching of our cradle faith and its moral code in our public schools. Our elites view this as social progress upward from a dark past. To much of the world, however, America has become the most secularized and decadent society on earth, and the title the Ayatollah bestowed upon us, the great Satan, is not altogether undeserved. And if what our democracy has delivered here has caused tens of millions of Americans to be repulsed and to secede into social isolation, why would other nations embrace a system that produced so poisoned a politics and so polluted a culture? Nationalism and authoritarianism are on the march, writes the Washington Post. Democracy is an ideal and in practice seems under siege. And Buchanan says yes, and there are reasons for this. Listen to this carefully. Democracy lacks content. As a political system, it does not engage the heart. And if Europe's people see their leaders as accommodating a transnational EU while failing to secure national borders, they will use democracy to replace them with men of action, that famous fascist, celebration of men of action. I would personally rather have men of thought, but men of action, okay, so our democracy has led us to become this immoral, decadent nation. And the problem with democracy is it has no content. Now, this, by the way, this is what a lot of the radical Muslims say. That remember Erdogan in Turkey, he said democracy is like a streetcar. When you get to the stop you want, you get off. And that's because he sees the content as being the point, not the freedom itself. On our own site, on the Daily Wire site, Eric Erickson, and I don't mean to attack him personally, he writes some stuff I really like, but he wrote a very thunderous denunciation of America, saying the American experiment is at an end. The American experiment, says Eric Erickson, is at an end. The nation will continue, but barring some crisis that rouses the American people to our better angels, the experiment is over. Our founders determined that our republic had to be premised on a good and moral people. The law is only as good as the people. There are just too many examples of the people not being so good. Evangelical support for the president is at an all-time high. This news comes as more Playboy playmates and porn stars come forward to confess to adultery with the president while his wife was pregnant. Even many of the president's ardent supporters now acknowledge it, but they do not care because the president gives them what they want. Call me crazy, says Eric Erickson, but when you have the all-powerful, omnipotent creator of the entire universe on your side, you should not have to rely on a slightly orange adulterer for protection from your enemies. So let's think about this for a minute. Are we now deserving of destruction because we're no longer moral? Has democracy failed us? So to me, I got to be honest, some of this stuff seems like a lot of overwrought nonsense. At any given moment in time, when you have a country filled with 325 million people, there's going to be strains that you find immoral. If you had gone back into the 1950s when people were going to church more, when there was no divorce, very little divorce, when abortion was illegal, you still would have found all things, by the way, which I disapprove of the collapse of our religion. I disapprove certainly of abortion. I certainly disapprove of divorce, especially when there are children involved. And yet, at the same time, there were plenty of immoral things going on, like the kind of bigotry that kept the black guy from using a bathroom so that he had to explain to his son why we can't go in there because the color of your skin is not the right color. That was immoral as well. So there's always immorality going on. No nation is perfect. There's always stuff going on. What I notice is these people who decry the immorality of America also tend to turn out for authoritarianism. That's what bothers me about the Buchanan article, is that basically he's saying democracy has no content, and so we're immoral, and we need to get rid of democracy or put it aside for authoritarian rule so that we can be moral. But here's the problem. It is true that our founders said that our Constitution was written for a moral people. It is true that only a moral people can be free. But here's the paradox. Only a moral people can be free, but only a free people can be moral. Because if somebody puts a gun to your head and says, don't get divorced, if somebody puts a gun to your head and says, don't get an abortion, you may get the right outcome, but you're not a moral person. You're not a moral person if you don't cheat on your wife because her father's a mob boss who says he'll kill you if you do. You're just somebody who's afraid. You're just somebody who's under the gun, and that is not morality. So while it's true only a moral people can be free, it is also true that only a free people can be moral. So how do we solve that problem? Well, first let's look at the way we don't solve the problem. A lot of people on the right, and I'm talking about the right, I've already talked, I'll talk endlessly about how the left doesn't care about freedom anymore, but a lot of people on the right have started to uphold Vladimir Putin as the defender of the faith. He is the great man who is going to defend the Christian faith. He's going to defend white supremacy and the white races, and he is the one person who is committed to the kind of rule we need. And we see this especially among the far right. And to say the only nice thing I'll say about Putin is that he does play on religious bigotry. He does play on hatred of homosexuals, but he doesn't play on anti-Semitism. He doesn't play on white supremacy. He doesn't talk about that at all. But Putin is a criminal. Putin is a guy who blew up his own people in order to start a war, who prosecuted the war in Chechnya with just absolute brutality, journalists and critics of Putin vanish and die under mysterious circumstances. Basically, he is running a small mob of about 100 or 150 people that they call the oligarchs. These are the guys, when the Soviet Union collapsed, these are the guys who pillaged the holdings of the state and made themselves billionaires, right? That's all it is just a bunch of guys basically, running a mob for their own benefit, their own profit, and oppressing the Russian people. They are not the founders, the protectors of morality by any stretch of the imagination. Trump may sleep around. Trump may do bad things in his personal life. Trump has done nothing that compares to the evil that Vladimir Putin does. And so when I hear people on the right saying, oh, we can't, our country's not moral, we need Vladimir Putin, it really does disturb me. So, what do you look for? What do you look for when you look for freedom? What does freedom look like? Does it look like morality? Does it look like people going to church in shirts and ties? Does it look like no gay pride parades where people wander around, flashing their fetishes at you, which is incredibly annoying and incredibly grotesque? To me, that doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't make sense at all. Because like I said, only immoral people can be free, but only a free people can be moral. I took a little bit of actual encouragement last night from watching the hearing on Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo is Trump's former CIA director, Trump's nomination to be Secretary of State. And there has just been an absurd, the resistance is put up against Mike Pompeo. It has just been embarrassing. I mean, we remember when Cory Booker went up against him because he didn't support gay people. And you think because he's a Christian, basically, and he thinks that being gay is not moral. And does he mistreat people in his offices because they're gay? Because Jeanne Shaheen said Senator from New Hampshire said she wasn't going to support him because he was against abortion. He was against abortion and against gays and all. She had a moment. It's a really interesting moment. I just want to play this one little clip. This is during the hearings for Mike Pompeo. Jeanne Shaheen starts questioning him and basically accusing him of not being fair to his own staff at the CIA. And Pompeo's argument is, hey, I have my opinions, I have my religion, this is what I believe, but everybody gets the same treatment from me. And they just had this, just to show you how stupid this stuff has been, they had this exchange that went like this.
And yet you were criticized at the CIA for undermining policies of the previous administration to improve diversity at the CIA.
Ma'am, I don't know the criticism that you're referring to. I have to tell you, I didn't undermine a single policy. We've emphasized it. We've talked about it. We've worked on it. I think I'm proud of the work that I did to continue to develop and increase the capacity for the CIA to deliver a diverse workforce to meet the challenges, the intelligence challenges in that case, around the world.
Well, I would just say Michael Weinstein, who is a former Air Force officer who founded the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, says that he has been seeing increasing complaints from those inside the intelligence community under your leadership. So I think there have been a number of concerns raised.
Ma'am, if I might,
please.
The number of, we call them no-fear complaints, the statutory requirement, decreased from 2016 to 2017 by 40%.
Good.
Good. So everything I said was nonsense. Good. So they go into this committee, and the president gets a Secretary of State. I don't think a Secretary of State has ever been refused. And so this committee, they had the votes because Rand Paul was holding it up, saying Pompeo supported the Iraq War, and Rand Paul doesn't like us to do anything overseas, and he wasn't going to support him. But Rand Paul says now he's got assurances from Pompeo that now he dislikes the Iraq War and he wants it to be over, and so on and so forth. So, but they split on a 10-10 vote because the deciding senator, Johnny Isakson, was at a funeral, and so he couldn't vote. And that just would have been embarrassing. I think it would have come to a vote eventually anyway, but it could have been held up. But Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, changed his vote to present so they could get him out of committee. And that is the way these things have to work, right? He didn't have to support him. He won't support him on the floor. but he let the thing get out of committee because this resistance, you know, Bill McGurn wrote a thing. I mean, just talking about people who've lost the plot of freedom, who've lost what freedom looks like, that it looks like losing sometimes. Sometimes freedom looks like losing, you know. Bill McGurn wrote this great column today talking about the fact where he says, all right, Donald Trump, you know, has violated norms of behavior. He's violated norms of politeness. He has violated norms of the way a president behaves. But the elites who oppose him, the elites who feel that the election took away their plans, their power, their idea of what America should be, have violated norms so much more than Trump has and brought things down so much further that it's they who are really the threat to freedom. And he goes on and he lists this thing. He says in the thick of the 2016 election, the New York Times ran a front page article in which it advertised that the particular dangers posed by Mr. Trump's candidacy meant that the long-held norm of journalistic objectivity might have to give way to a more oppositional approach. So the press lost its way. Good liberals, says Bill McGurn, once found the idea of spying on American citizens without just cause unconscionable, but when the target is a former Trump campaign associate, it becomes okay to get a warrant based on an unverified dossier paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign. So the intelligence community lost its way. When Sally Yates was acting attorney general and President Trump issued an executive order on immigration she objected to, Miss Yates ordered the entire Justice Department not to obey the president, despite a finding from the department's Office of Legal Counsel that the order was lawful. And she was applauded in her insubordination by Andrew Weissman, then a justice attorney who now serves on Robert Mueller's team. So the Justice Department lost its way. In the middle of a Me Too moment, ostensibly all about more respect for women, the president's press secretary, Sarah Sanders, has been derided as everything from a summer whore to a slightly chunky soccer mom. So the social warriors on the left have lost their way and lost the idea of what freedom looks like and how it works. And the pardon power enjoyed by the president is among the most unfettered in the Constitution, but because the president is Mr. Trump and the pardon for controversial Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and the pardon was for the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals has opted for lawlessness. It has opted to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate the pardon's legitimacy. So many, many judges have lost their way and have lost what freedom looks like because they want it to go their way. And that's not what freedom looks like. Let me just say for just a moment, before we get to the Jonah Goldberg interview, that Plato, the famous Greek philosopher, and Plato's Socrates, had many of these fears about democracy. He feared, he talks about in the Republic, Socrates talks about the fact that that freedom, people become addicted to freedom. They then start to love pleasure. They then start to love money. They become fascinated by their own ability to buy things, fascinated by pleasure, and they lose freedom, and freedom devolves into tyranny. And he says freedom, democracy is the path to tyranny, says Socrates. So it is a real problem. So where does that leave us? If only a free people can be moral and only a moral people can be free, are we just caught in this circle of decline, as Socrates said, that has to lead to tyranny? The answer to me is simply this. Freedom looks like an argument. Freedom looks like everyone speaking freely, trying to convince the other of the way to go. I believe that our particular democracy is based on Christianity. If you can't sell your Christianity, you just can't sit around and say the American experiment is over. You've got to go out there and actually sell what you believe. You've got to sell it as a joyful, positive thing that is going to improve people's lives, not as something that means that people who act differently than you have to be condemned, because that's just a no sale as far as I'm concerned, and it's not Christianity either. Go look at the Gospels for a change. Go look at what Jesus says. Look at the times he condemns other people's behaviors. Almost never. He almost never does, unless they are religious people blocking the way to heaven, to ordinary people's path to heaven. That's what he really gets down on, okay? That's what he really gets down on. Otherwise, he's talking to you about how to find the kingdom of heaven. Are you talking about that? Are you selling that? Or are you just thumping your fist into your palm and condemning people and then expecting them to turn around because it makes you feel like a righteous person? You know, here's the thing. It is about winning the argument. Freedom is about winning the argument. That's why I fight so hard against the left when they want to shut people down. If you're afraid of winning the argument, if you're afraid of losing the argument, Even, and by the way, even if you lose the argument, your responsibility remains the same, because then you're talking to what they call the remnant. Then you're talking to the next generation that's going to come down the pike. When Cicero in Rome lost the argument, as my own son has pointed out in an article in the LA Times, when Cicero lost the argument and the Republic of Rome collapsed, he wrote about democracy for future generations. John Adams was quoting Cicero while they were forming the Constitution and the Declaration. That's who you're talking to. You're talking, freedom never dies, the right never dies, the truth never dies. You got to keep on talking. This whole idea that, oh, you're bad and therefore we have to get rid of freedom is cowardice. It's cowardice. It's cowardice to say that we've become an immoral nation, therefore we need to get some authoritarians in here to enforce morality. That is just, I can't even say the word on the air, but it's chicken. It's chicken. You've got to stay in the argument, and if you lose it in this generation, you try to win it in the next. Freedom sounds like debate. Freedom sounds like talking. Freedom sounds like protest. Freedom makes a lot of noise.